Welcome to Laser Reviews. My name is Arvid, and I spend much of my spare time watching movies. Some of them are good, some are far from good, and I therefore decided to give you my recommendations for which movies to watch so you don't waste as much time of your life with bad movies as I have. Of course, these are just my opinions, so you can feel very free to disagree. Today's episode will be a bit different in that it will not be about horror movies, and it is also fairly unplanned. Irrespective of doing the show, I decided to go back and watch the four Mad Max movies. And having watched them, I realized I actually have a lot of thoughts about them, some that might be a bit controversial. Well, I'm not sure actually what people generally feel about these movies, but it seems to me they have a special status that I might not necessarily agree with, or maybe agree with, but for different reasons. So yes, I decided to make an episode of about them. I will probably be even more into spoiler territory than usual. Sometimes I try to talk about the quality of movies without spoiling much. This time I'll not be holding back. I will spoil everything because it will be quite relevant for what I have to say. I would argue, and also I think thinking about this might be the first time I'm talking about a movie franchise that's not made by Americans. Though, contrary to what seems to be the normal belief, is that Mel Gibson is actually not Australian. He is an American, but who was raised in Australia, from what I understand it. So, I mean, the star of the film is American, but the production of it, Australian production. I think the only other franchise I've been talking about, at least where the first movie, maybe even the first movies, were not exclusively American, was the Omen franchise that also had and involved in a British production, but where the main people behind it were American. So, okay, let's just get into it. So, the first Mad Max is from 1979, and they are all made by the same man, all directed by the same man, George Miller. So, we should expect a consistent tone. Right. That is what I would assume, that there should be a consistent tone of these movies, or at least a consistent idea, a consistent universe. We will see if that actually holds up. And I think that the first film is fundamentally different from the other movies. I think most people, when they think Mad Max, they think post-apocalyptic desert movie with leather outfits and wacky cars. Also, because, and I don't want to get into the whole history of this, so I'll just very briefly say this: the Mad Max movies were hugely influential in that of post-apocalyptic films that just mimicked Mad Max. So there was so many movies, often filmed either in California or in quarries around the world, where with gangs, often biker gangs, wearing these makeshift outfits. I'm not gonna call them. I don't even know what they're not armors. They're not. You often like just what you would find in your regular BDSM store, just maybe with some plates of metal on top or something. So these very easy, cheap to make movies, just a bit of chase, a bit of action, usually a damsel in distress and terrible world building. I've seen so many of these movies, and I think it's not the fault of Mad Max that it spawned that it was so successful and spawned such a desire for this type of movie. But I am sad that the market became so oversaturated with these type of movies because, in my opinion, often when I hear post-apocalyptic movie and the 80s in the same sentence, I think of garbage because that's usually what you get. But let's view the movies in their own right. That's what they deserve, and I think about all the other movies that were inspired by them and that are, to a large extent, absolutely terrible. So the first movie follows Max, or Max, played by Mel Gibson in this. It's not post-apocalyptic. It's kind of described as dystopian, but overall you don't really understand much about the world at this point because there are functioning towns, there's a functioning police force, there's a judicial system, there are courts, there are all kinds of shops. The fields are the ones you see in the movie are actually, in working condition, that people are tending to the fields. You see lush forests and farms, and even the bike gangs and the civilians and the heroes of this movie are wearing fairly realistic, not even realistic, very late 70s everyday outfits, maybe with a few slight adjustments, but it's really just looks like you could have told me that this movie is set in some faraway community in rural Australia in the outback, and some gangs have taken over this territory, and the local police force is trying to fight back without getting any help from the authorities, central authorities. And I would have believed you. There's not really. I think there's some hints to food shortages and that general law and order and social order is breaking down, but you don't see much of it in the film. And that's why this movie, as I said, feels very different. It actually doesn't feel like a Mad Max movie as you would think of Mad Max movies. And in that way, because it's the first film, maybe it's just more that this movie is actually the Mad Max movie, and the other movies don't feel like a Mad Max movie. Basically they're not shot in the same universe, and I think there are some attempts to create a coherent universe of all the movies, at least to some at least the first three movies. But I don't know if the attempts are there; they're quite poorly made, and I don't really buy it. I don't really see how this could all be connected. I think in the second film they just give an excuse for what happened. Of course, I'm not sure. Actually, they probably do try to explain how the situation in the first movie led to the situation in the second movie. It's just it's not really believable. Anyway, that's enough about that. Let's talk about the movie itself. So the opening of this film is without a doubt the best thing about the movie. It's probably also one of the best openings of any movie I've seen, and it's probably also one of the best chase scenes of any movie I've seen. It opens with police reports about a murder of a policeman and that they're in pursuit of the culprit. The culprit turns out to be a man named Knight Rider who's riding with his girlfriend or his girl, and the police are then chasing him on bicycle and in their police cars that actually don't look like real police cars. Also, already a hint here that something is that things are not completely on the right track for the authorities. So they chase this guy and they're taking out one by one. Then Mad Max shows up and Knight Rider breaks down crying and then crashes and burns quite literally. And it's a very effective scene. It's quite long. I think it's 10 minutes long, but it's one of the best things I've ever seen. And from there on out, it's really slows down here and becomes weird, to be honest. So it then cuts to Mad Max and his girlfriend or wife and their little baby. I think it's a baby son, but I'm not sure about this. I actually forgot. And yes, he is then told while going to the police station that the gang who Knight Rider was a part of is out to get him. It's out to get revenge. And we then see there's a few good scenes about the camaraderie or, all the different people in the police department. Most of them are actually quite interesting characters and quite lovable. It's not just stupid typecasting or, they could just easily have hired pretty much nobodies who don't do much to fulfill these roles. But no, they actually gave every single policeman, they gave a bit of charm, a bit of personality. And I do like that. It's a nice detail. And the police commissioner or police chief is amazing. He is pretty much the exact opposite of what you see in an American film. He's a bit overweight, bald, smokes cigars, and has this big mustache. I think it's at that point it's more like, I think it's called a chopper or something, like a really big mustache. And yeah, he's just cool. I really like the scenes he's in. He's not in that many scenes, but he's a real cool guy. And I do remember that it's actually not that uncommon for police commissioners to smoke cigars, but in other ways he's much more rough. Like he's seen some shit. He doesn't seem like a traditional authority figure. That maybe he came to this position not through pencil pushing and backdoor handling, backroom handling. Am I saying something wrong here? He got this position through being fierce and taking out the criminals. That's the impression you get. He's a real lovable guy. So yes, we then are shown the biker gang arrive at a town that looks a bit like a western town, like from the old west. The same kind of wooden construction and everything. To some extent, I'm not trying to exaggerate this, but it's actually kind of what it looks like. And it turns out this gang is led by a guy called Toe Cutter. And the reason they go to the town is because this is where the body of Knight Rider is displayed before. It's near some train tracks, so I think it's going to be sent somewhere. And Toe Cutter is, aside from the opening scene, Toe Cutter is the reason to see this movie. That villain is so batshit crazy, and his performance is so amazing. You kind of don't understand how he can be the leader of anything because he's a lunatic. And I don't know if society breaks down. I don't know if it's the lunatics that will lead biker gangs. I would assume that maybe it's more smart people who then also have some lunatics that they control. That's usually what happens in a lot of movies, unless they're really, really B movies. But no, in this one, it's the maddest of them all. This mad dog, he's like a feral animal. His hair is all bushy and like all wild. He is seen squatting like an animal. He kind of squats like a Slav, but the way he then moves around when squatting is more like an animal. So when he has a sound, he turns it like more like an animalistic reaction to it than a person hearing a sound he has to react to. So just if you see this movie and you squat yourself, I'm not calling you an animal. It's more the way he does it. I just wanted to avoid any potential trouble with my local community here. Who am I kidding? They're probably not going to see this. Anyway, yes, so this toe cutter guy, the way he's first presented, you kind of see him in the game. At that point, you don't know if he's the leader, and then when you do realize it's the leader, you have these four guys approaching the guy who works at the station, and you see first toe cutter from the back, and then when he turns around, you actually see his hands before you see his face because he takes his fingertips and just really menacingly touching the face of the guy operating the station. And I need to remember what he says. His lines here are golden, and the delivery is golden. I think his name is Knight Rider. No, sorry, I'm messing it up already. His name is Knight Rider. Remember it when you look up into the sky. Something like that. And I think he even repeats it, and he has the guy repeat it. And the guy also says, "Sure, everything you say." And then Tokoto goes, "Oh, everything I say. What a wonderful philosophy." Or something along those lines. It's really good. He I don't know how many movies he's in. I know from what I remember, he's actually the one playing the main villain in Mad Max Fury Road. But he's playing a new different character. But he's really good at playing a mad dog. And I want to see more movies with him. I should really go out because if he is just half as good in other movies as he is here, I don't know. That's reason enough. That's what happens here at the town. They are harassing some of the locals. One innocent guy is being dragged off, chained to a motorcycle. Prompting that is the movie actually opens with a guy with a sniper rifle, a policeman with a sniper rifle, spying on a couple having sex, and the couple is then seen later on the movie in this town. And they try and escape, but they are caught by the gang who've completely demolished their car with pipes and that sort of thing. And it's heavily implied that they have non-consensual love with the woman and kind of beats the guy. The guy manages to escape, as we see, because we then, before the police see what happened at the crime scene, they see the guy running through a field. And the only one left at this place is one very crazy guy. So when I said the other guy is madman, he's like the evil madman. The other like he's I don't know if I can use Dungeons as a Dragons term. So he's more like chaotic evil, whereas the guy at I guess he's also chaotic evil, but he's more in the neutral area. His insanity is more beyond his control, and he seems to only be doing bad things because he is in a crowd of bad people who encourages it. Although he probably also does have some bad thoughts himself, he just seems less capable of running his own affairs. I don't want to apologize that kind of behavior he does in this movie with him saying, "Oh yeah, he had no agency over his acts." It's just how it's presented. He's more reluctant to do evil because he's taken into custody, and the problem is that at the trial, nobody shows up, no witnesses, no nothing. So the judge shows up at the police station and has asked for the man to be freed because there was no trial, so he can't be arrested and put in jail. This is where you also get the idea that actually things are not really that post-apocalyptic at this point. That there is still law and order to some extent. Maybe the police officers all wear leather jackets, and maybe the bad guys all wear leather jackets, but there's still a resemblance of law and order. But one guy, this cool-looking guy with short white hair, he's so frustrated that this man will not seek justice that he ends up beating up the guy. So the guy and Toe Cutter wants revenge on him. I don't know why they kind of stopped chasing Mel Gibson, Mad Max at this point, because they kind of forgot about him, it seems. That we are told early in the movie that they're looking for him, but now they seem to be looking for the other guy instead. Eventually, they catch up to him, set a trap, and not Mel Gibson, but the guy they're chasing, and he ends up with his car flipped over and with leaking petrol in the car. So Toe Cutter wants that crazy bad guy, the one who was arrested, to set the car on fire, but the guy begs Toe Cutter for let the guy live. That he didn't want that, as he says, that he might be bad, he might be a potential rapist, but he doesn't want to participate in the killing of the man who arrested him and beat him. But lo and behold, what happens is Toe Cutter kind of just either flings the cigarette, the match himself, or he makes the guy drop it. So the guy is burned alive, and once Mad Max finds out, I'll just call him Mad Max for now. Once Mad Max finds out, he quits the force, and he just wants to go up north with his family and start a new civilian life. But on their way there, near the coast, which is also important, we don't see the coast in any of the other Mad Max movies, so they're at the coast at this point. Their wife or girlfriend runs into Toe Cutter and his gang, and they are again all behaving like animals, wanting to probably also do non-consensual things to her. But she kicks Toe Cutter on the balls and takes an ice cream, smears it all over his face, and drives away with. I don't get this. Okay, I don't know. I'm not a parent, so I would assume the baby is 2 years or less, but she gave him an ice cream. I don't know how old you have to be to eat ice cream, but that just seemed a bit weird to me. And he's at the back seat of the car, not even like he's not on the back seat, that storage space some cars have on the back. He's there, not tied to anything, just holding his ice cream because he didn't have the time to give him any better seating. So you're also worried in the scene about, but the roads are bumpy. You're really worried about this kid in the back of the car, but it doesn't really cut back to him that much. And so she gets away. Turns out that one of the guys trying to stop the car used a chain, but instead of stopping the car, ripped his hand off. And then they go to the local police where they are there, and they just say, no need to report it. Let's just, if nobody comes in requesting lost property, we'll just, treat it as it is. It's like a case of lost property, not a case of, grievous bodily harm against another human being. Anyway, I found that a bit funny. So they finally arrive at this very idyllic house in the countryside. There's a big forest nearby. It's very beautiful. It's run by this. It seems to be run by. Honestly, I didn't really understand the relation with this house, or if that was the final destination. But this old lady with a mentally handicapped son, or a slow son, I guess, are keeping this place in order. But the gang catches up to them, end up killing the woman and the child. So Mad Max goes on a final rampage, killing a lot of the cars and a lot of the guys just driving them over or making them drive off bridges. There's one cool face-off scene. So Mad Max has a double-barreled sort of shotgun in the entire movie. I think he shoots it with it once or twice maybe. So it's a cool weapon. I wish they'd used it more, but I know the movie is very low budget, and I think they just spent all the money on these car crashes because they look great. Those stuntmen doing these things, wow, hats off, man. So at the very end, Toe Cutter ends up driving into a huge truck, and the movie ends with Mad Max having the guy who was arrested. He has him trapped under a car. Fuel is leaking. He kind of chains him to the car, So yeah, he's not trapped under a car. He has him changed up close to a car that is about to burst into flames. He gives him a saw and tells him that he might have a time to cut off his leg to escape the fire. So this is a straight up Saw moment, or maybe you should say that Saw is a straight up Mad Max moment, just with more time to achieve the goal. So and Mad Max drives away, and that's the end. What can I say about this movie? It has a very good opening. It's quite slow. Almost all the characters are quite memorable. The henchmen, like the biker gang members, are all of them are a bit different enough to give them a bit of soul, each and every one of them. They're all a bit wacky and crazy, and yes, I don't know. It's there are a lot of things to like about this movie, but I remember the last time I watched this movie was I don't know 6 7 years ago with a group of friends, and we were all thinking we were going in to watch a good action film, and we were quite disappointed. We were actually treating the movie as so bad it's good, which I don't think is fair. But actually, if you do look at the performances of the villains in it, the motivations, the world building of it, not so much the world building in this one, just that's a lot of things you don't really understand about what's going on, and a lot of the character motivation that seems a bit. Some of it is completely fine, but there's a lot of the story that's a bit lacking, and a lot of it is just weird, and I don't know if if Toe Cutter is supposed to be intentionally funny, or I think he has to be so wacky. It's funny, but also in an intimidating way. And I think seeing it, watching it again on my own, I was actually quite happy that I gave it another chance, because I do think the performances and the few action scenes we do get are generally quite good. It's just some of the filler in between is we honestly they are even kind of good at not stretching it out too much, that we get a few thrilling moments or suspenseful moments or action moments leading even within those longer sections of not much happening. So it's not terrible. Like it's not egregious against the amount of them and the time we were a bit bored as the audience. And I think that's just how I will end the review on this movie. That I can recommend it. I think it's good. I think it's odd, and I think that they didn't necessarily have a complete vision about the world this movie was taking place in. But there are a lot of things, at least no, there are a few things that I really like about it, and then some things that I can accept because I like those things. So yes, it's actually that movie holds up. What about the sequel? So Mad Max 2, also known as The Road Warrior, is the movie that actually started post-apocalyptic trend. At least from what I gathered, there are probably movies before that were somewhere in the same vein. But this movie is fundamentally different from Mad Max 1, and I therefore can't say that Mad Max 1 inspired all this entire genre, because if it did, I don't know how they got from A to B in that. It came out in 1981, and already you can tell that a lot has happened since the events of the first film. So a voiceover of an old man explains very loosely why the world is as it is. So basically, the world ran out of fuel, and that led to complete chaos and breakdown of social order. It's slightly implied there might have been nuclear weapons involved. There's this line, I think, that they started a fire that engulfed the world. But then after that, they started talking about the fuel crisis, and then we had the breakdown of order. So I don't think it really is referring to nuclear weapons. If it is, it's really poorly told, to be honest. And it also is implied that what we saw in the first film is actually the aftermath of all this. That this is after the fuel crisis hit, and that there was no social order left, no civic order, no civil order, and that's just not what we saw in the first movie. Not really. There are no hints that they're running out of fuel or anything. So I guess you could try and say, oh, this is just how it started in the first film, and of course it got worse. Sure, I can buy that. Let's just watch the movie as it is. And I think that's just what we had to do. So now everybody's out for oil. Oil is the black gold. It's what drives everything. So the movie again opens with a chase scene, this time faster than the other one, with more modified vehicles, but it's honestly just not as impactful. We are introduced to this new weapon that, due to breakdown of supply, breakdown of production, ammunition is quite expensive and hard to come by. So instead, people are using crossbows. They're using small crossbows they are wearing on their hands like armbands. They are making larger crossbow guns that fire darts. So it's usually to stop people's cars. It can also be used more in combat, but it's used to puncture wheels. So we see in the opening that Mad Max is hunted down by a BDSM gang. And that's what I talked about before. This is so much better than many of the movies that try to do the same. But yes, a lot of the people here are just straight up BDSM people. And I'm not even kidding. Like the bad guy you see here in the opening, who has a very fantastic pink mohawk. No, sorry, it's more reddish than pink. On the back seat, or like behind him on the motorcycle, is his boy toy, who is chained to him via a collar and lock around his neck. And he's just this beautiful guy. So yes, this is a BDSM. They're not all homosexual. There's also some women and there's some sex scenes, but it's kind of this weird universe where the BDSM LGBTQ people took over the world as gangs. And I absolutely love that. It's stupid as all hell, but I love it. And if you look at the uniforms, I think the reason why you wear leather when you're riding a motorcycle is if you fall off, it's gonna hurt like hell if you're not wearing something hard. So the leather is supposed to protect you. But this film, like they're having their arms exposed. The boy toy is having his nipples and chest exposed. They're usually not using helmets. So it's just, they like the look of leather. They like these silly outfits, and I don't know. I'm on board. I can't take it seriously, but I'm on board. And after Max escapes this, he's pretty much out of fuel. He has problems with the car, and then he comes across this guy with I guess it's a gyrocopter, who also seems to be mostly out of fuel. I don't know if that's why he stopped. He tries to have Mad Max hand over his possessions, and Mad Max has this same double-barreled shotgun, sawn-off shotgun, that he used to intimidate his way out of situations. Only that you later realize, I think it's more than 30 minutes into the movie, that it was never really loaded, which I think is such a genius move. I can only love it. It's a really good idea. But then soon after, gaining the upper hand on the gyrocopter guy, he is actually close to probably killing him. That's at least what's implied. But instead, he tells him that there's this place with an unending amount of fuel, an unlimited amount of fuel, and that he will show him. True enough, in the middle of this desert is a walled settlement that has so much fuel that it has flamethrower cannons at the gate. And it has one fuel pump, or one oil pump. It must also have a refinery. I guess it is a refinery. It has all these things. I'm honestly not an expert on oil extraction and refining, but it seems like it's a refinery and a pump. And it's being attacked by this BDSM gang, led by this huge guy. We always see his muscles. Like he's chunky. He has an impressive body. And he's wearing a hockey mask. And actually, I thought, when I watched this movie, I realized, I thought to myself, wait, is this where Friday the 13th got the idea from? Because Freddy is wearing a hockey mask in the third movie, which is from 82. So actually, this movie did it before Friday the 13th. Only this movie is not really supposed to be a hockey mask. It's spray painted and looks metallic, but it's quite obviously a hockey mask it's based on. So maybe it did inspire Friday the 13th. I don't know. I have a hunch that there might be some correlation, but I don't know. And all these people, again, they're wacky, they're crazy, like the most insane people. It would explain it if they're all junkies or constantly on drugs, but you never see drugs in this movie, so I think they're just crazy because they're crazy. And yeah, they are trying to demand Like they are trying to arrange a deal with the people in the settlement that they can just walk away. Again, one of those very iconic scenes because the guy playing the big muscle leader, he's a Swedish guy, so his accent is really really strong, but it actually works in the movie's favor. So it's a very impactful scene with him saying it. And while they're trying to not even negotiate a deal, just tell them to hey give up, we'll kill you if you don't. This kid, and I think in the credits he's the feral kid. So this kid, kind of looking like a squirrel, long-haired squirrel, crawls out, uses a boomerang, and kills the boy toy of the leader's second in command, the one that fought Mad Max earlier, and also ends up chopping off the guys of this weird, I don't know, is he called the lawyer or something? This weird guy, and everybody just laughs at him having his fingers chopped off, even himself. But this of course infuriates the guy who lost the boy toy, and that kind of is his motivation for being very angry throughout the rest of the movie. Meanwhile, Mad Max tries to think of how he can create a situation where he can benefit from approaching the gate and maybe broker a deal. He then sees his move, I think it's the next day, when some people are trying to escape the base but are caught by the gang and they are kind of murder raped to death. One guy is a bit barely alive when Mad Max arrives and they negotiate a deal for if he brings it back to the base, he'll get some fuel. So he takes it back to the base, and it turns out that this camp is led by people mostly clad in white. So we have the leather BDSM people who all have colored hair, dyed hair, and then we have the good people who most of them are clad in white, and there are a lot of women, and they have a democracy, they have a council, they negotiate everything. So some of them want to agree to this deal, some don't. Some want to give Mad Max what was promised to him, some want to offer him something else. So instead he comes up with this idea because at the beginning of the film he saw this huge truck. So he says, okay, if you give me some fuel, I'll get the truck, I'll bring it back here, and I can help you with your plan to escape. Because they have a plan to escape instead of just surrendering. And by now, I already have quite a few stories. So when I talked about the world building being bad and inconsistent, so we have this camp. We have animals running around, I think chicken and pigs. We have, I think, even a few scenes where people are eating. We don't really see what. There are no vegetables, no crops, no nothing around. There's not even a source of water found. And there's no way to explain it. And it seems like they have been holed up in this area long enough to build walls and flamethrowers, and we see quite a large area in this film. And there's no source of water anywhere to be found. Again, if I missed something, please correct me, but it seems that they have a settlement without any source of water and any source of food. And they have probably had it for quite a while. And they're not trading with anyone else. That's also important. And I think there are at least 30 people in it. Maybe 20, I think, because some people die, so somewhere between 20 and 40, I would estimate. And I don't know, it's one of those things that doesn't really make sense. Also, like, if there's no social order, how do all the bad guys dye their hair? And how do they get so specific things for their BDSM costumes as they do? Because the hair colors are quite synthetic. I don't know, so that's why this is one of those movies you don't ask questions and just enjoy. And I do enjoy it. I will say that I do enjoy this film. I kind of want to, because this is already long. Mad Max goes through the whole situation. He ends up sneaking past the enemy camp. He meets up with a gyrocopter guy. Early in the film, he chained him to a tree, and now he finds him dragging the branch from the tree after him, which is quite cool. And then the gyrocopter guy is quite lovable. I do like him. And then they kind of buddy up. He gives him a bit of fuel, and then he helps him, Mad Max, back, because when he drives the truck back, it's daylight, and he's being attacked by these raiders, and they are causing a lot of damage to the truck, even taking out at least one of the wheels. Now, Mad Max insists that his deal has been fulfilled, like his end of the deal has been fulfilled, so now he just gets the things he needs for his car and takes off. And the leader of the settlement really wants Mad Max to stay and drive the truck and help them escape, because their plan is to go to this lake that they have these like travel brochures for. And Mad Max doesn't want that, so he leaves and is immediately caught by the raiders, who destroy his car. and he then returns to the settlement barely alive. I think he's saved by the gyrocopter guy. Actually, I forgot exactly what happens here, but he ends up back in the camp, and now wounded, he says, "Yeah, I'll actually drive the truck." And the leader of the camp quite rightly says, "Like, what? Why would I let you? And why did you change your mind?" And I say, "Yeah, I have no choice now." That's pretty much true. So they spent the last, I think they had 24 hours, or maybe even only 12 hours to get everything ready. And this truck is full of they make guard towers on it with spikes on it, and crossbow or bolt shooters, whatever you would call them. And the idea is that the truck, because they have the huge fuel, what do you call it, like the tanker is connected to the truck, so the truck will get the attention of all the bandits, and then the rest of the people there, some of them driving in school bus, the other ones in other cars, and quite a few vehicles. They will scatter around and drive in all directions so that there's a bigger chance that they won't be caught by these bandits. And that's what happens. So the finale of the film is another chase. It's the truck being chased by all these, quite a few bandits. I think there are at least 8 different motorcycles and cars chasing them. And there are a lot of action, a lot of people dying, a lot of cool scenes. And I don't really want to get into them too much. I just really enjoyed the scene. It's all it has to be. And by the end of it, Mad Max is the only survivor in the truck, and it falls over. And it's revealed that the whole time the tanker was full of sand. At this point, everybody is dead. All the leaders of the gang, bikers, are dead. And the few remaining bikers is just looking at the scene, realizing that just sacrificed everything for nothing, and leaving Mad Max to survive the film, and leaving the civilians to peacefully settle in this supposed area that they wanted to go to. From what I gather, it turns out the fuel was in the school bus the whole time. So what I will say, this film is quite enjoyable, but this movie also made me realize that Mad Max, at least Mad Max 2, is a B movie, a very big B movie. It's a stupid movie with not a very high budget that you just have to shut off your brain and enjoy. And a lot of the design decisions in it are very enjoyable, even for their stupidity. This is an enjoyable movie, but this is also why I realized that, okay, Mad Max is maybe not the masterpiece I thought it was. Because I think most people who heard about Mad Max are hearing about it with being highly praised. And I think Mad Max 2 is a decent film. It has a few very, very effective scenes, but it has so much filler and nonsense and boring stuff in between that the good scenes are not so good that I feel like I want to go back and watch this movie soon. I think it will be another 10 years before I want to pick up this movie again, because unless I want to see a few different scenes, because honestly, the first chase scene is a bit okay, then the scene where they are attacking, there are a few scenes where they attack the encampment, and those are cool. The last chase scene is nice, but pretty much everything else about this movie is actually not that interesting. It's okay at best, it's acceptable at best, and I'm struggling with how I should feel about the feral kid. I think he's easily the worst thing about the movie, but I'm not sure I would want the movie without him, because he gives it this B feel. Like, the movie, without him, it wouldn't feel like the schlock it is. It wouldn't be a special kind of schlock. Like, it would more be just generic schlock. His presence in the film makes it special. In what I would normally describe in a bad way, but I don't know. He's just this annoying kid who doesn't know how to speak. Presumably, he must have grown up among people because he's a part of that settlement. At least it seems he is. We also have no idea how many years passed since the breakdown of social order. Presumably, he would have learned to speak earlier. He doesn't look that young. And if he grew up without people, how has he survived for this long in the desert? That it begs so many questions. He crawls around like a monkey, kinda, and he's terrible in the film. And it turns out that actually the old man doing the voiceover is the kid. Just grew up when he grew old, so he apparently learned how to speak. I don't know. I have so mixed feelings about that kid, but overall, I think Of the first two full movies, so from what I watched so far, there might even be bigger reasons to watch the first one. I think if you want the good action set pieces, the ending of this movie might have you more engaged. But the first one is just weirder. And actually, I do like both of them, so I'll give both recommendations to both of them. So let's move on to Mad Max 3 Beyond the Thunderdome from 1985 with Tina Turner. Sadly. Of all the Mad Max movies, this is probably the one that I have the most mixed feelings about. So, all right off the bat, I think it has tripled the budget of Mad Max 2, and it used the budget to create an entire town in the middle of a desert, and also create more interesting set pieces than the second film, which only had this very basic settlement and pretty much nothing else. But it also suffers from much the same as the second movie, and also so this is in the first movie, in that the world building makes absolutely no sense. So it takes place in Bartertown, where there are a lot of people. And it's called Bartertown, so there's probably a lot of business going on. And you have all these leather people. You have I struggle finding a comparison. So think about the Siku Siku Sputnik, the band, but a post-apocalyptic version of them. That's the main soldiers of Tina Turner on this film. That's what they dress like. There's also this short guy who has this Japanese, tied to his back. There's a stick with this Japanese mask on it, a woman's mask. It's really weird. So if there's something I will say just from the beginning, this movie has a lot of really really weird ideas and a lot of wacky, crazy, and good ideas. And some of them are maybe not implemented right. A lot of them are, and some of the ideas are probably outright bad. But I just love the craziness of it, the creativity of it, the attitude towards just creating this universe. Especially if you see the other post-apocalyptic desert movies that came out of this around this time. This movie really is creative, and there's a lot of effort and love for this film, which, if nothing else, that's what you should be able to see in this movie: the love for the craft, the love for creating these wacky things. But yes, so there's the settlement. Everybody's wearing leather and metal pieces, and just all these weird things. Nobody are wearing clothes anymore, because why would you in the desert where you might want to cover your skin to not be burned by the sun? I mean, all these people are white and they're not shown wearing any kind of sunscreen or anything. But I don't know, who cares? Again, no water sources, no food industry. You don't see any field. I mean, this is even more of a desert than the first film. Than the second film. You do see that there's this huge indoor pig farm, but those pigs are for biofuel. And you learn that if you do kill a pig to feed someone with it, you're actually sentenced to life as slave to work these biofuel farms, basically. So you don't know that they don't eat the pigs. Meaning, again, very large settlement. This one, they probably have at least 100 people living there. Very large settlement, no water infrastructure, no established food supply. And although it's called Bartertown, it really has no infrastructure and connection to the outer world, it would seem. There is a railway line in it that's crucial for the ending. And the railway line is largely well maintained, but I'm not sure if it's for the convenience of it, or because the railway is used to trade with other people, but that's not established in it. So it's one of those really weird situations where, a society exists in a place where it shouldn't exist. And we also established in the second film that there are places with fresh water. So if the entire purpose for this town is actually to create biofuel and to exist as a bartering town, but existing outside of any infrastructure with other towns, I mean, there's just no reason for it to be where it is. It just feels stupid. Again, one of those things you just have to accept to enjoy the movie. Just, look at the wacky costumes, look at the fights, look at all those things that actually work, or at least arguably work, and you should be fine. But the second you start thinking about this film, it just completely breaks apart. Or at least mostly breaks apart. So yeah, Mad Max now having long hair, now being even more of a seasoned road warrior, arrives at this Sparta town and he has to surrender all his weapons. So, in the first film, no, sorry, in the second film, it was very difficult for him to even get bullets or slugs for his shotgun. In this one, when he's surrendering his weapons, he just has 6 or 7 firearms he surrenders. So ammo is no longer an issue. And it's also established that gyrocopter guy and a new kid, I think, it's not the same kid, is back in the film, but they, aside from arriving with him in Bartertown, there isn't really much to their characters until the very end of it. So anyway, he arrives, he is taken straight to Tina Turner, who is the leader of this town, at least the official leader of the town. She reveals to him that she has a problem and he has to pass a test. Turns out the test is that she sets all her bodyguards to kill him, and he defeats all of them. And that's the test. That's how he passed it. Oh, sorry. Actually, in her office, there's fresh fruit. So we do see food here. We have no idea where that fruit came from. And it's fresh. And there's a lot of it. So yes, Bartertown, no infrastructure, but maybe there is trade from places with a lot of food, and they give fuel in turn. Again, we all don't really see infrastructure for the fuel. The one train we do get in it has some fuel capacity, but I'm not really sure it would be efficient enough for the amount of trade that's viewed in the film. So again, it's not that the universe that you can't try and piece these things together yourself. It's just that the movie doesn't do it for you. And even if when you do try to piece it together for yourself, you don't have enough pieces to actually make it completely believable, immersive, I would say. So it's revealed that the problem she has is that she has this telescope, I guess, but it's a reverse telescope, so something that looks down and not up. So she looks down into this manure area that looks very dystopian, and it's led by this Master Blaster, where Master Blaster are actually 2 people. It's the Master, who is a small person. Is that the right person to use? Right, word to use. Who is played by this old Italian guy, and I don't think the guy speaks English because his lines in this movie. So he's he's tied to the back of Blaster, who's this huge guy, and it's kind of implied in the film that he's the minds behind the whole operation. But because of his limited English, or maybe it's just the instruction, he's actually also shown to be quite an idiot. The Blaster might have a mental capacity of a 5-year-old, but the Master might have the mental capacity of a 10-year-old, judging by how he speaks. But yes, so the thing is that whoever controls the power supply is actually the person in power here. And that's why she wants him to be put out of action, because he publicly humiliates her with shutting off. They call it embargo. So, shutting off the power whenever it pleases them to assert their influence over the surface dwellers. So, yes, that's the dynamic. Mad Max is sent to infiltrate them, and that whole scene is actually not executed very well. Seems like he brings a car bomb there, but instead of diffusing it, he tries to do something else, but then he does diffuse it. But then they confiscate the car, and it's never established why he brought the car down in the first place. Only that it's useful in the next scene, where it turns out that the entire legal system is based on trial by combat. So he now, having his car confiscated, he uses it to challenge Blaster to a duel. Because the idea is, if they take out Blaster, the Master will have no choice but to obey the rule of Tina Turner. So that's what they do, and that's when the Thunderdome is introduced. It's this huge metal cage where they have weapons tied to the ceiling, and they are wearing big bungee, like not bungee ropes, but kind of bungee uniforms, so they can jump up and down. And that's so they can use that, and they also the Thunderdome is covered in spikes, so you can also use those to impale the opponent. And right away, Blaster kind of almost beats Mel Gibson's character to Mad Max to a pulp, and Mad Max knows that he's sensitive to sound, but he keeps dropping this flute, this whistle he brought in with him. So the fight scene is quite good. They have different weapons, and there are like a lot of good gags, and by the end he actually does manage to find the whistle and brings down Blaster, uses a hammer to smack off his helmet. And it's revealed that Blaster is actually a guy with Down syndrome. And Mel Gibson refuses to kill him, saying this was never a part of the deal. The thing is, the deal never mentioned the mental state of Blaster, only that he was his mental state was inferior to Master. So, it was actually kind of implied that he was at least mentally retarded or, backwards. But apparently Mel Gibson doesn't like it because he has Down syndrome, and like there's a visible limitation to his mental capability. Whereas had he not seen the face, he would probably not have had a problem killing someone who is strong but not intelligent. And that whole thing just is stupid. Honestly, not terrible, but it seems so forced. It really seems forced because this has Mel Gibson betrayed Tina Turner, and he's then sentenced to this wheel of judgment where his punishment is the gulag. And when I saw that it was the gulag, I was really curious about what that might mean. Oh, I should also say that the Down syndrome guy is then killed by Tina Turner's guards. So Mel Gibson's betrayal actually made no difference at all. But it turns out that gulag means that Mel Gibson is tied to a horse facing the wrong way with a hat over his head. And the horse is then having a stick in front of it with some food in it that has it walk into the desert. And of course it collapses, and Mel Gibson is then found by this girl. And this is where the movie turns bad. So the first part of the movie is kind of enjoyable. I mean, it has all these stupid things about it, but it's actually quite cool. Not as good as the second film. Even I would say, compared to the first film, I would also say until this stage is inferior. But here it turns into Lord of the Flies, because he arrives at this place. This again, this is not that far away from Bartertown. And here we have a river, but Bartertown does not know about that river because that river is the home place for these children who are. So again, some things are not well established, but because these children are children and there are no adults, and we are told that the adults left, they have had to have been born prior to the disaster, prior to the world collapsing, meaning that less than 10 years have passed because some of these children are 10 years at most. And the reason why I say they had to have been born there is because it's revealed that they are the survivors of a plane crash, and the plane is right next to them, and that the pilot, I think he's called Walker, left with 10 of the other people, and this society then developed where all the children are wearing fur, which, thinking about it, actually is weird because we never see any animals in it. So I don't know where they got the fur from. So they are all wearing fur. Again, what they eat, I don't know. Maybe they are fishing, but there's no food here. Nothing to forage really, because despite being a river, it's not really that lush there. There are not that many trees or anything. But they create this whole mythology about it, where they're using this television screen made of sticks to tell the story of their people, and they're having all these artifacts from all the world. And at this point, I really liked it. I thought it was a really quirky idea. But then these children are sticking with us for the rest of the movie. I thought maybe Mel Gibson would come across them and it would demonstrate this addition to the universe, like world building, like expanding it, creating different scenarios for different societies in it. A bit like when you play Fallout and you come across all these different communities and you only spend some time there and then move on to a different community. I had really hoped that this is what the movie would do, but instead the rest of the film turns into like this family comedy almost, with all these children all having terrible haircuts, all having really poor agency, not really that well acting, creating all this forced the fact that the children are there forces Mad Max to go back to Bartertown, whereas Mad Max says he just wants to live there, but some of the children walk away, like they want to, because they think Mad Max is Walker, so they think the prophecy has been fulfilled. So some of the children are trying to go out and find this new community of their own, because they think that the old world is still out there and they need to go out and find it. So Max has to follow them, leaving a lot of the children behind, and Max then manages to find them, but now they're so close to Bartertown that they can't go back because there's not enough water, so now they have to go back to Bartertown. That's what I mean, that this is so forced, so contrived. It's a very bad way of having Max go back to Bartertown. It's not the worst way you could write this, but I honestly really don't like the direction this movie takes. And the sound design turns laughably bad. Like, it kind of has the sound design of Indiana Jones or any even like family comedy of the time. It's absolutely terrible. Makes these scenes that might actually be impactful had they not had children in them turn stupid, slapsticky even. Like the guy with the head on his back, like the mask. He keeps taking damage, he keeps getting into trouble doing the movie, and he just keeps surviving everything. And it kind of turns into a gimmick, and I don't know. It's just too much, man. And it turns out that this, I don't know why, as I said, Mad Max drove his car down into this area that is underground, where the bio farms are. I don't know why he drove his car down there. It doesn't make sense. It also turns out that the train tracks are like actually leading into that area, so there's a train there. But the train seems like it was never meant to start. That's why I say that what I said about the infrastructure, that it kind of tears down things with it when it started. So it was kind of immobile. Also, the train, the way it's built, doesn't really make sense. The place where the people in it are, it's not called the cockpit. The station where the driver is at, or whatever it's called in a train. It's elevated quite high above everything else, and it also just looks stupid. And finally we get a chase scene. Also, no, sorry, that's right. I'm trying to remember. So yeah, the train. So we're having a chase scene between them and the train, and all these bad guys, and also the master is on the train. And suddenly he changes his clothes from wearing like slave wear to wearing a suit. I have no idea where he got that costume and why he changed in the middle of the chase, but he does. And it's chased down by all these Tina Turner's guards, who tries to get it back and tries to get revenge because it kind of blow up her settlement, and she has to re-establish control, and they chase them down again. Some good scenes. The chase scene is not bad, but just goes on and on and on because the train is then stopped by the kid we saw in the beginning together with the gyrocopter guy. They blocked the path for the train, so they had to get out of the train. But that means that the tracks are used by other people, but otherwise, why would they block them and use it as a place to hold up people? But at the same time, if it has been used before, it has prevented all supplies from coming into the town and out of the town. But had it prevented things from coming out of the town, people in the town would have known it. And people would also probably ask questions why no supplies are coming into the town. Again, giving me the suspicion that they didn't think about how this universe is structured at all. They didn't think about infrastructure or anything. Can I blame them? Yeah, I can. I think you should actually, if you're trying to make a good film, you should think about these things. You can think about them and then just decide not to incorporate them. That's also, an option, but it did kind of frustrate me a bit. Then it turns out that the gyrocopter guy now has a plane that is absolutely ugly and somehow managed to fit all the people inside of it. I think they have 6 or 7 children by now and few adults, and Mad Max is the only one not going into the plane. He's using the car to kind of divert attention. And there's this final confrontation where he, of course, managed to take out some of the bad guys, but not all of them. But the plane takes off. His car is demolished, and Tina Turner then decides not to kill him. And we see that the children now created this new settlement in Sydney, where they turn the ruins into the new place of residence, hoping to attract other people to come back, to go there and live. Even though we have no idea why they want to live there, we have no idea if there's anything functioning there. It just looks very abandoned and destroyed, ruined. I have no idea why it would be better to live there than source of fresh water or whatever. But that's just the movie. That's all I can say. This you just have to accept things in here. So bottom line, do I like the movie? I'm not sure. I probably don't want to see this movie for another 10 years, but there are even less reasons for me to watch it again. Aside from some of the few good scenes, I think it's more the quirkiness of it that kind of makes it interesting. If it does make it interesting, I really don't think it really works as a film that much. It's a bit tonally confused and all over the place, like how it completely changes in the middle of the film. Also, Tina Turner is a terrible actress. She's so over the top that some people might like her performance. I found it quite insufferable, and honestly, aside from Mad Max, there are no people in this movie you really like, probably. And Mad Max's performance is just stiff. Everybody else is Compared to the first one, where actually every character was quite memorable, in this movie there are so many characters and so many wacky guys that none of them feel memorable. They all just feel like the same, that they all feel interchangeable by being wacky or interchangeable by being kids, or even Gyrocopter guy's a bit boring in this film. He's okay in Fury Road. No, sorry, in Mad Max 2, but in this one he's just meh. So honestly, I don't know. I don't know if I can recommend this one. I think if you absolutely love the desert apocalyptic theme of the second film, go ahead and watch the third one. But other than that, like I don't think I like it that much as a film. I don't hate it, I just don't like it. So, having covered the original trilogy, I now want to talk about the fourth and, at the moment of recording, final Mad Max film. Of the ones that have been finished, there are two more movies announced. One is Furiosa, another is Mad Max The Wasteland, whereas Furiosa seems to have been made. The Wasteland, I'm not so sure if it actually will be made or not. So Mad Max Fury Road came out in 2015. It's still has, I think the chronology of it is weird, because I'm not sure if it's meant to be a direct sequel to the third film, or to the first film, or to be a remake, because, I mean, I think for good reasons, Mel Gibson is no longer playing Mad Max. Instead, they have cast Tom Hardy in that role. I don't dislike his performance, but it's not even that Mel Gibson gave a brilliant performance. It's just a more memorable performance, I think. I think one problem with this, with Fury Road, is it actually doesn't that much feel like Mad Max movie. It feels like Furiosa's movie, played by Charlize Theron. She is pretty much just the one that is. I'm not going to say she's in the center of this, because both of them are, but she has much more to do in this movie than Mad Max, I would say. So it doesn't feel like Max's film. It feels like her film. Then, not even kidding, much of the movie, Max is tied to a truck and can't do anything in the beginning. And then when he can't do something, he still has to rely on everybody else. It's not a bad dynamic. It's more that criticizing Tom Hardy for not giving a good enough performance. I just don't think he's given a lot to do in this film. But sorry, that's a weird way for me to start, because I actually really like this movie. I think it suffers again from the same problems. The world building, or to present the audience with a world you understand and believe in, the world that makes sense, a world that's well established, well developed. It tries in some ways more than the other movies, but utterly fails in the main majority of the ways. For example, it does show that this one, the villains are having the society where they are having the warriors. They're called war boys, I think. Yeah, war boys who go out on their war rigs to plunder the surrounding. So now there's one settlement that's, I think it's called the Bullet Factory. There's another factory, I forgot what they produce. So they are either raiding them or extorting them to hand them over, or hand over their supplies, because like these are the big power in the region. Evil Immortan Joe, as he's called, the evil weird baron of the wasteland, I guess, who has a source to fresh water, which is from what I gathered, it's either underground source, or it's somehow lodged within a mountain. So either taken from far below or from somewhere in a mountain. But again, one of those things that's not well established, but at least it shows how some of the people get food, because it's shown that it grows fields. What it doesn't show is that this place, it's in the middle of the desert again, and Immortan Joe's headquarters is up high in the mountains, whereas everybody else lives in rags down below, so when he lets out water, they can all get the water. But we never see them do anything. We never see them work. We never see where they live. We never see how they could possibly get food. So for all the movie shows us, these people are plants just being watered by Immortan Joe, and that's the entire existence. Yeah, that's what I mean, that this movie actually doesn't work when you start thinking about it, just as the previous ones. But what this movie does better than all of the other ones, maybe again, aside from the opening shot from the first film, is the action. And it's because this movie had an absolutely humongous budget. And because of its budget, or maybe because of other reasons, it actually didn't end up, it didn't become a flop, but it was very close to being a flop, unfortunately, because I don't think it deserves it. I'm very sad that I didn't watch this in the cinema because watching these effects on a television is just not the same. Because it's beautiful. It has some. It opens up with some amazing chase scenes where Mad Max is being caught by these war boys, and he's turned into what they call a blood bag. So these war boys are basically the ideology or religion of Immortan Joe's people is never well established. And that's one of those world buildings that I actually do like, that you're never given all the answers, and every answer you're given are leading to more questions because the war boys wants to be witnessed by Immortan Joe so they can enter Valhalla. And when they think they're going to enter Valhalla, I think they're spray painting their teeth, and they're also hooking themselves up to people they call body bags or blood bags. I don't know why they're hooking themselves to people. Maybe it is established that I didn't catch it. But yeah, one of them has then Mel Gibson, Mad Max as a blood bag while going into battle, which is a very tense scene. And it kind of goes back to the second film. I didn't even mention that the second film has the bad guys strip the good guys to the front of their cars so that, human shields. So, not to dwell too much on it, it has some really good scenes. It has some really good effects. It turns out that Furiosa, who's the leader of the Warwick, which is this huge tanker with battle towers on it and everything, she has taken the harem of Immortan Joe, where Immortan Joe tried to have all these attractive ladies give birth to his coming chieftains or his coming soldiers. As the movie opens, he only has one son, and one of the women is pregnant. But actually, Furiosa then decided she bargained for them to return to her people. I think it's like the mothers of the Green Place or something, where all these women can live freely and not be sex slaves of Immortan Joe. That's the story. So it's a road movie where they have to escape Immortan Joe. And I have talked about how the first, second, and third film are quite low on the action and have a few scenes that really work. This movie is almost all action because it is one big chase movie. And I love the design of all the cars. It has these sand people from Star Wars in it, people who don't speak languages you understand and wear rags, and their cars all covered in spikes. And they are at war, they're raiders and are kind of at war with Immortan Joe. And Immortan Joe's war boys also, they are pretty much, because they have this religious belief, this indoctrination, they are also willing to pretty much commit suicide if they can take out the enemy doing it. So it's just those people, first the war boys, whereas the one of them, the one who used Mad Max as a blood bag, he ends up realizing that maybe his religion is a bit wrong, and these women are taking him in, and he converting him to one of our protagonists. Mad Max is also very reluctant to help these women. At first, he is only looking out for himself. The only reason why he ends up helping them is because he has to. He tries to just drive away from them and leave them for Immortan Joe. But turns out that the car is wired in a way where it has kill switches, so if they are not deactivated in the right way, he can't drive. So they are relying on each other for each other's survival, and they're holding each other at gunpoint, and of course develop a relationship throughout the movie. Some of them die off along the way, but they're having a relationship. And because it's almost pure action, there's actually not much else for me to say. There's some world building. Like, as I said, what I wanted to see more in the third movie is like seeing more ways to exist in this world. And they do drive by this dried out, almost swamp-like territory where people are walking around on sticks. And I think you only see that for 3 or 4 seconds, and it's dark. But that is really cool. And it turns out, actually, from what I understood, that place is actually the old place where these green mothers lived. It turns out it's not even a matriarchal society. It's just all women, and all of them are old. Almost all of them are old. There's 1 or 2 young women among them. And they used to live in this lush society, but it dried out and it was taken over by raiders, and that's why they now live on the road on their motorcycles. And they're now trying to figure out what to do now with these, like, they don't have an unlimited amount of supplies. They have to figure out what to do next. And the women just want to try use all the fuel they have from the tanker and all the water they have left. They actually don't really discuss the water. Just, Yes, it's a desert. Let's just don't mention the war, and don't mention the water, and we should be fine. If the plot doesn't mention it, the audience won't think about it. But this is where the movie's most stupid scene is, because they have this idea that they have enough fuel with them on their motorcycles for 160 days of travel. They're not really seen carrying a lot on those motorcycles, and even if they were carrying all the spare fuel with them, it would make the motorcycles even more difficult to drive, so they would be slower and use more fuel. So even if they were having some fuel with them, spare fuel with them, it would probably not be one. So I don't know what kind of super fuel can drive a motorcycle for 160 days. That alone is had me thinking a lot, and I really hope I'm wrong about this because I do like the movie. So if you can correct me, please correct me in the comments. But this really already killed my brain a bit and put it into overtime, or rather, the next scene put me into overtime because they actually start riding out, and then they suddenly stop. They're trying to cross this salt flat, so it's a completely flat area with salt. Thinking about it, I don't know if it's implied that this is the ocean, and if it is implied, it's not well implied. It's just, I'm thinking if this takes place in Australia, actually a lot of it is shot in Namibia, but if this takes place in Australia and then there's a big salt flat, I don't know if Australia has any salt flats, so it could be that it's supposed to be the ocean. But then I actually don't think that. No, it can't be. The ocean wouldn't be flat like that even if it had dried out. So no, it can't be it. So no, it's not the ocean. It's just I was trying. Sorry, I was trying to save this movie from disgrace, but I can't. There's nothing excusable about this. So they drive out and they suddenly stop, and then all the women say, "Actually, we talked about this, and we want to go to try and take over Immortan Joe's place." First of all, how are they talking about it while riding on the motorcycles? Like that's a lot of noise. You can't talk. They don't have any intercom or anything, so they have to yell to each other. So they probably talked about it before riding out. But why did they already waste time and fuel riding out if they already agreed on this? That alone is really stupid. But what Mad Max says next blew my mind. He says, "What I do know," because I think he actually, it's either him or Furiosa who has to try and convince them to actually go back and take away most of Joe's place because they have all the water and everything. So they know there are supplies there, and they also know he's weakened because they killed so many of his men. So the sentence being said is, "What I do know is if you drive 160 days in that direction across the salt flats, you won't find anything." So I did some Googling and some research. It seems that a motorcycle is capable of driving around 40 kilometers on average on unpaved flat ground, which the salt flats would be. Let's even just dumbing it down a bit. It could be 30. Sorry, I'll give finish my estimate here. And then saying, okay, so even assuming they have enough fuel, how many hours a day would they drive? Let's just say 10. It's not a lot compared to they have nothing else to do, but let's just say 10 hours a day. That means that in 160 days, they would be able to drive 64,000 kilometers. The circumference of the world is around 40 kilometers at the equator, meaning that if they drove 40 kilometers an hour for 10 hours a day, 160 days, they would drive around the world 1.5 times. So even if we say, okay, maybe they're only capable of driving 30 kilometers, then it's still more than around the world. Or even just, let's say, 20 kilometers, it would still be almost the entirety circumference of the world. So what is being said in this scene is, if you drive around the world, you won't find anything. That's never established in this universe. It's never established that the only thing left in the world is this mountain with Immortan Joe in it. Sorry, but this movie would have been near perfect. No, sorry, it would have been a really good action movie that wouldn't hurt your brain too much. Had this line not been there, I would have been able to swallow so much more. Sorry, I'm using bad idioms here. I could have accepted so many minor plot inconsistencies and everything, and inconsistencies in the world building, but this was just so stupid I had to include it. And I think also, as you said, that the movie is almost non-stop action. When they do reunite with the old women, And when Furiosa realizes that actually that there is no Oasis out here, it kind of turns into a mix between Star Wars and an Oscar movie in some of the cinematography and sound design and performances, with Furiosa walking out into the desert, falling to her knees, like, not in disappointment, not in frustration, sorry, I forgot the word. Like, all is lost, all was for all was in vain. The people we lost were in vain. We have no future left. That sort of thing. Sorry for forgetting the word. And then it picks up pace again right after this and turns into an action movie as they make it back to Immortan Joe's place. The way Immortan Joe is killed, by the way, is really, really cool. It's a bit fast, but really cool. And they end up back, and the people accept them as the new leaders. And as Furiosa is raised up in a lift to assume the position as the new leadership, the movie ends. So, if you look at this as a film with a good story, a coherent universe, good world building, it's probably not a good film. It's probably quite bad. If you look at this in terms of how enjoyable it is, I would say it's a very enjoyable action film. I think this is not very different from the other Mad Max movies, but almost all the action takes place in cars. In this film, they do change things up so that it actually stays a bit fresh, that they do some action scenes differently. They do surprise you. The ways they actually make them stand out a bit is done quite well, with one where you think it's leading up to a good action scene, but all the action actually happens off camera. And at that point, you see so much action that you actually don't care about it being off camera, and it's only a nice moment. So I think I really enjoyed it as an action film. Which brings me to the final verdict. First, is Mad Max a good franchise? I think it's an okay franchise. I think it's overhyped, and I think it's because of how influential it was. Because I don't think the quality of the individual movies are good enough to make them stand out as like this influential, great, fantastic franchise in cinema history. Like, I think it kind of is elevated to too high a place if we just look at the movies, the quality of the movies, and don't take into account the influence. But I guess it's difficult to do that. There are some movies that still hold up despite what I'm trying to say is that maybe they were the reason why they have such a cult status today and such a popularity is that they were fresh at the time, and they were doing much with a low budget, and that they were entertaining enough, at least for its time, to create this following for the movies. But then looking back, seeing what other movies we have, what movies we have gotten since, because yes, they might still be among the best desert post-apocalyptic movies, but in hindsight, maybe that is not really a good genre. Would we have had Fallout without this film? Without Mad Max? I'm not sure. So I understand why we still talk about them, but maybe we should try to detach the influence from the movies themselves and watch them as they are and not for what they led to. I think that's what I'm trying to say, and I'm not doing a good job here. I'm sorry. And that's why that's what I meant about being controversial. I think people love Mad Max so much that going against the grain and saying maybe they're not as good as you remember, or even if you just watch them, maybe not as good as you think. Maybe it's too hyped for you, so you think you have to like them more than you do. Or maybe it's just, I would say of all the movies, I haven't seen any of them alone, aside from, I have seen them alone as well, but I also seen them with other people, and I know that they share these feelings, at least to some extent, so I know I'm not alone in this, but I don't know. For final verdict, I think the first Mad Max movie is worth watching, without a doubt. The second film has enough good scenes to make you forget about the bad or boring ones. The third movie is such a mixed bag that I'm not sure I can recommend it. Fury Road is really good action, but you have to be able to accept some of the stupidity I've talked about, or at least lack of world building, lack of scientific application of scientific knowledge and laws, that sort of thing. And you would also have to be into car chases. But yeah, I can definitely recommend that as an action film. And I think I had no idea. I thought I would be talking about this for 30 minutes. So I'm really surprised at this point. So I will end this. Take care. To have Mad Max Hand over.